On this episode of the Catholic Echo podcast from the Diocese of Youngstown, brought to you by the annual Diocesan Appeal and Cumulus Radio Youngstown, we're talking about Mother Cassini and Jack Sebest, with Msgr Michael Cariglio, Jack Sebest, and Oblate Sister Teresina Rosa. Find more about this episode's topic, including articles from the Catholic Echo, at www.catholicecho.org/podcast. And now the host of the Catholic Echo podcast, Dennis Viviano.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Catholic Echo podcast. Joining me is Msgr Michael Cariglio, pastor of the Basilica of Our Lady of Mount Carmel and St. Anthony Padua Parish in Youngstown. Nice to see you as always. Today we are going to talk about Blessed Mother Maria Teresa Cassini, founder of the Oblate Sisters of the Sacred Heart of Jesus. She was beatified in October 2015. Now, of course, Mother Cassini will always be tied with Camel native Jack Sebest, who miraculously recovered from a drowning, healed through the intercession of Mother Cassini when he was 5 years old. Now, Msgr Cariglio, first off, what can we tell listeners about Mother Cassini and the Oblate Sisters?
Well, they came in our diocese, I think in the 50s, under the episcopacy of Bishop Emmett Michael Walsh, in order to serve in various capacities in the diocese as a group of very dedicated sisters to the priesthood. They like to, with all their hearts, serve the needs of priests, to pray for their sanctification, to promote their vocations. And they also involved very much with little children. For example, they have been teachers and administrators of at least two of our Catholic schools over the years, and they have promoted preschool on their own property at Hubbard.
And of course, Sister Joyce Candidi is in Rome currently.
Yeah, it's a group of about close to 200. It's an international order. Originally strictly Italian, but they have branched off, or they have several nationalities. So, yeah.
Now, you handled the case of Jack Sebest more than 20 years ago for the diocese. At the time, 13 doctors unanimously said it could not be explained by science alone. What can you tell me looking back at those times?
Jack was 5 years old, I think, at the time. And I think he went to the preschool of the sisters. So he was known by the sisters and the family. They kept in close communication with the sisters. And then what happened, I think, at a closing of the baseball season, had a gathering at somebody's house with an outdoor swimming pool. And all of a sudden, no one could find him. It was a hot day. The water was murky. It took them too many minutes to find him. They finally found him. He had drowned at the bottom of the pool. They called a paramedic, and they revived him, and they brought him to Sharon Emergency. And the doctor in emergency, I myself talked to that doctor, so I know it was true.
Wow.
He suggested strongly just let the child go.
Wow.
He was just trying it. And the mother and the father were there. And they said, no, we can't do that. Let's take him to Todd. So they took him in emergency to Todd here in Youngstown. The doctor in Sharon wasn't wrong because he was near death. And they said, well, we're going to put him in a coma. And if he survives, he won't have much left to his brain. There will be severe brain damage. And of course, the parents loving the child, let's take our chances. Let's do everything we can for the little boy, 5 years old. And it was around the time of a few days before the Feast of the Sacred Heart of Jesus. Because they knew the Oblates so well, they called the Oblate Sisters and said, come and pray for Jack. He's not going to make it. And so they came and they prayed through the intercession of their foundress, Mother Cassini, that he be healed. And they placed a holy card on his person. They also stayed there for a great number of hours with the family in the emergency room or the ICU room where they put him. And they continued to pray both in their chapel at the Mother House, and they also notified different parishes where they knew the priest and asked the priest to announce prayers for the child through the intercession of the now Blessed Mother Teresa Cassini. So that morning on the Feast of Sacred Heart of Jesus, he came out of a coma. He was asking for something to eat, and he got out of bed and started playing in the emergency. At that time, one of the doctors came in and said, "Will you please get that little boy out of here? Can't you see that?" And he looked over, referring to the little boy who was supposed to be dying. He wasn't there. He was playing around in ICU unit.
What's going through your mind when you see this complete transformation from somebody who's preparing for death and just...
Oh, yeah, well, they were elated, and there was definitely association with the celebration of the sacred liturgy at the Mother House. This happened. He came out of a coma while they were offering the Mass with the priest and others that were there, while they were offering the Mass on their feast day, the Solemnity of the Sacred Heart. They were praying, obviously, for him. So that was the amazement of everyone.
And you were part of the group that went to Rome and stating the case for Mother Cassini for sainthood one day.
Right. I was looking at my notes, and we did all this in less than 3.5 years, which is kind of a speed time for these kind of cases, So she was already named venerable years before this happened, and then the requirement to go to the next state of blessed is one miracle. So having looked at this, and one of the doctors I remember very well, Dr. Labid, he was Muslim, and he said, "I've never seen anything like this." He said, "And I know that if the child would live, he would have so many deficits, it would be such a burden for the family, but I'm telling you, just to be prepared." And he ends up with no deficits. I went down when we petitioned Rome to do this. There was a postulator named by the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Causes of the Saints, Father Califano is his name. He's the postulator of the miracle. But since the miracle took place outside the city of Rome, they had to assign somebody in the diocese where the miracle took place. And the bishop asked me, because being a church lawyer, a canon lawyer, asked me to do the case, So one of the things I did in accepting the case and to be the vice postulator and the delegate for the congregation and properly delegated by our bishop was to go to the Children's Hospital in Columbus. And there I met a doctor who has dealt with drownings. And she was not of the Catholic faith, a Methodist. She said she had dealt in her career with over 260 cases, and she's never seen any drowned person, little ones, come out of it without some deficits that they had to deal with.
Of course, Jack is thriving today in his middle 20s, and he's really embracing that story. He's telling his story to various parishes.
Yeah, he's fully functional.
I would just ask, what life advice would you give to him to embrace that story and continue to share it?
I think he should tell. It's a miracle in the name of, by the Lord Jesus, through the powerful intercession of Blessed Maria Teresa Cassini. He should share that with everyone. Because his case was an unusual case in the sense that because we had 6 doctors here in the United States look at it, and they were in unison, that just could not be explained through medical data. And the congregation retained 11 others in Europe to investigate what the American doctors said, and they all concurred that the evidence gathered, it was a lot of work. The evidence gathered would be, if you could think of 3 Budweiser cases of 24. That's how much our material was done. And when we sent it over there, a lot of it had to be translated into the Italian language from the American language.
Msgr. Cariglio, thank you so much for your time. In the next segment, you'll hear from Jack Sebest in his own words. Keep it here on the Catholic Echo podcast. We'll have much more to come.
When storms hit, we are there to rebuild. As our neighbors age, we lighten their burdens. As our veterans adjust, we ease their transitions. In every part of the country, we are there. We are Catholic Charities. We serve millions each year regardless of their faith. We put food back on tables, unlock doors, and walk together on the road back. Help Catholic Charities serve your neighbors in need. Join us at wearethere.us.
I live a unique life, and God's will is to share that good news.
Jack Sebest grew up at St. Patrick Church in Hubbard, receiving the sacraments here as a child. He's no stranger to public speaking and the public eye, dating back more than 20 years when he was given a second chance at life, miraculously surviving a drowning. Years later, and now joined by his wife Alyssa, he can still remember the advice he received from former pastor Father Tim O'Neill, when Sebest says he felt unworthy as a teen to distribute the body of Christ as a Eucharistic minister.
He told me that humility is one of the things that Jesus values the most, and that will bring me closer to my faith more than anything, is accepting the blessings I've been given.
Sebest says his family tried to keep his experience private. It took 12 years of investigations for his miracle to be verified in the beatification of Blessed Mother Maria Teresa CASINI. In 2015, Sebest was a junior at Ursuline High School when it became known he was going to meet the Pope in Rome.
That transition from 13 to 17 made me realize that this isn't something embarrassing or something that's putting too much light on me, but it's my responsibility to put that light back on God and the Oblate Sisters. I owe everything to the Oblate Sisters.
Sebest's story is still fresh in the mind of Oblate sister Joyce Candidi, who prayed for a young Jack Sebest, who woke up from his coma without any sort of brain trauma.
This accident took place on Wednesday, and that following Thursday was when he was revived and he just came to, and that was on the Feast of the Sacred Heart. We were having Mass that evening with all the sisters. That's when the telephone call came in.
And when Mother CASINI was given credit for the miracle in 2015 and named Blessed, it's a moment Sister Joyce will never forget.
I started to cry and I just started to tremble. I became so emotionally overcome. My relationship with her just kind of went to a whole nother level.
Sebest says to this day he enjoys reading about the lives of the saints. He believes his generation longs for a modern story like Mother CASINI.
There's a lot of people my age, my peers included, that leave the church, or they're simply not introduced, they're not catechized from a young age, and you could put that on their parents or you can put it on their grandparents, however it translates down. But hearing modern stories that there are people holy enough in their teenage years to live out and start lives such as Blessed Mother Teresa CASINI is outstanding.
And although he does admit to feeling sometimes like a pawn in the great chess game of life, Sebest says he's eternally grateful for all the support he continues to get from the community, even decades after his accident.
They say, like, I've heard your name, I prayed for you when you were 5. And that's amazing. They didn't know me. And so that's why now if I hear an ambulance sirens, I'll say an angel guardian. You never know who's praying for you in the time that you need it the most.
She tirelessly did all in her power to promote and cultivate priestly vocations.
Sebest carries this relic prayer card of Mother CASINI with him always, and while he hopes to see her elevated to sainthood during his lifetime, Sebest says he's focused on living out his faith one day at a time.
The most important, and I believe the most effective way to share the beauty that is Catholicism is being happy, being joyful, being genuine, caring about other people. And as long as I live out the Beatitudes and my faith and what my religion has given me as a gift throughout my whole life, then I can hope and pray that it reaches other people.
I think the fact that the Lord just revealed this very unique charism to her shows that she's very special in his eyes. The second thing is that her love for him was so almost just completely perfect that she wouldn't refuse the Lord anything, whatever his will was, whatever. And when we read her biography, her autobiography and her biography, you see that she just wanted to live a hidden life, very, very humble, but very, very much wanting to be in tune with living the will of God as an offered soul to the Lord. So. And to be a saint today or any time in the history of the church is to be one who is, just completely for others, for God, humble people. They don't think of themselves, but they give of themselves for others. And Teresa did that all her life.
One of the standout points to my trip to Italy was learning that when she was 14 years old, she became a nun. They realized she was so powerful, so holy, that they thought something about this woman is different. So when she got veiled and they cut her locks of hair, they kept them. And when I was in Italy and we went through the beatification process in her hometown of Grata Ferrata, I was the person that brought those down. I don't know all the science behind it, but the fact that they have relics that haven't changed in the 80 years from when she died, let alone the time when she was 14 years old, to keep them, speaks to that power. And reading up now on Eucharistic miracles, reading up on people even closer to our time like Pier Giorgio Frassati from Italy, knowing that there's 20-some-year-olds that have eventually become blessed or on their way to saints is outstanding. And to know that I'm a part of it, I don't want to say the reason because they did it on their own accord, but that I'm simply a part of it is humbling. I think that there was a large portion in modern history of people that turned away from faith because they weren't catechized correctly. I think that the way Jesus would have envisioned Catholicism is not the way that perhaps our great-grandparents taught Catholicism. There was, living in Youngstown, we have a great immigrant population, and I believe that a lot of it was taught that you follow faith because grandma taught you so. You follow your religion because that's what we've always done. You follow God because that's a part of our ethnicity and that's a part of tradition. Well, that loses its value over time, especially once it hits a couple generations, and now we're stuck with people like me that are craving for something deeper, but they don't know how to get it. And it's something bigger than tradition, and I've always loved my ethnic history and my cultural background, but to bring people to something authentic as, you know, young saints such as Blessed Mother Teresa CASINI that are committed at such a young age to something greater than themselves is refreshing, and I do believe that there will be a revitalization of our faith.
Coming up next on the Catholic Echo podcast, Katie Wagner sits down with Sister Teresina Rosa, who is celebrating 75 years in religious life. She was also a witness to Jack Sebest's recovery. Keep it here, much more to come.
Wondering what happened to timely Catholic news in the Diocese of Youngstown? It's at CatholicEcho.org. There, you'll find recent stories about Catholic life in all 6 counties of the Diocese of Youngstown, plus recent videos, podcasts, and even national and global news. You'll find it all at CatholicEcho.org under the News tab. Sign up for the email newsletter while you're there to have Catholic news delivered to your inbox.
We put food back on tables, support local workers, unlock doors, and walk together on the road back. Help Catholic charities serve your neighbors in need. Join us at wearethere.us.
This is Katie Wagner, Editor-in-Chief of the Catholic Echo podcast, and I am here with Sister Teresina Rosa, who is an Oblate Sister of the Sacred Heart of Jesus here in Youngstown. Thank you for joining us, Sister.
You're very welcome.
Well, I thought we'd start today by learning a little bit about you. So tell me about yourself. Where are you from?
I am originally from a little town east of Naples. Lovely town in which I was born and raised was destroyed by the earthquake of 1980. And so now they rebuilt in a valley, a kind of valley with the seismic protection. That part of Italy tends to have earthquakes quite often. Mm-hmm. I was in my little town and I loved it for about 14 years. Then I entered the convent in 1949. I was 3 years in formation. Then I took my first vows. I was in Rome for about 2 years. I studied there as a sister, a young sister, of course, and then was asked to come to the States. So I came to the United States in 1955. I didn't know the language. I didn't know it existed. It was an entirely new world for me.
Wow.
And so the first few months were quite difficult because of the not knowing the language. And I remember saying, Sister, you're going to learn this language, cost of any sacrifice, as soon as possible. And with the grace of God, I think about 6 months or so, pretty much I could understand. No, not everything, but I could understand some. And so I went 2 years at Ursuline High School to learn more of the English. And then I went to Youngstown College when I started. And then when I graduated with a certificate in BS in education. So then I began teaching. I did teach for about 30 years or so.
Wow.
Then I've been involved with other ministries. Worked for the Diocese of Pittsburgh for 3 years. I went to India for about 5 years.
Okay.
I was in charge superior of the house here and regional superior, vocation director. And so here I am. I have done, but I was happy wherever I was assigned. No matter where my superiors told me, even though it was difficult, but with the grace of God, I came through. Always God was there. He was the center of my life. And I forgot to mention to you that I was 9 years old when the Lord made me aware of His great love for me. Not only for humanity, but for me. And it was that call, that realization that I said to myself, no matter what, I cannot do what everybody else does. I must do something special for God. And that's when I began searching for a community. And when I entered, as I said, in 1949.
And what called you to the Oblate Sisters specifically?
It was the white habit.
Okay.
Because I didn't know much about their charism, what they were doing, I wanted to be a sister. I wanted to do something special for God. But I knew about sisters that were dressed in dark blue, almost black. I would say to myself, I'm too young to be dressed like a widow. I needed to be a happy person, So when I met one of the Oblate sisters, I said, this is where I'm going to go. So I approached that sister, and we made arrangements. She helped me to make arrangements to enter the convent.
Wow. Well, that's a good reason. So.
Yes. Then little by little, I discovered what we were all about. And I thank the Lord that I discovered it little by little. Because I think if I would have discovered everything all at once, it would have been scary a little bit. Because, to offer your whole life to God in sacrifice, it's for a great cause, and I'm so happy I did it. Very, very happy that I do offer my life daily for the holiness of priests, for vocations to the priesthood, and in order to support priests in any capacity that I can.
Absolutely.
Diocesan priest.
And I'm sure it was all part of God's plan to have you here.
Definitely, definitely, yes.
Now, earlier in the podcast, we spoke about Jacob Sebest and the miracle that occurred when he was young. He was revived after that horrible incident where he had drowned. Were you around at that time?
Actually, I was one of the first people to know about it.
Oh, wow.
It was about 11:30 on that night. It was 2003 or 2005, I don't remember correctly. We got this call around 11:30 that evening from Jack's father. And he said something bad happened to Jack, and they needed us, some of us, to go and meet them at the emergency Todd Hospital. At that time was special for Children's Hospital. So myself and one of the novices that were still up at that time, we got in the car and went there.
Okay.
We stayed there with the family, and that's when we started, said, everybody was nervous. So I said, why don't we just start praying? The Blessed Mother and Mother Teresa. Mother Teresa loved the children, and if there is a time for her to do something special, it's going to be the time. This is it. So we began the rosary. We prayed that rosary, then Mrs. Sebest, needed some help.
I'm sure.
So I left. The novice continued the rosary. I went to help Mrs. Sebest. try to calm her down, try to do something. Then after we all came into the waiting room, and it was about 2:30 that night, the doctors came and told us that Jack would never be the same, that they had to prepare themselves if he survived that night. Oh. A little later, then they called the father and the mother to go and see the child, and then they said that myself and one of the priests could go. And then Father Timothy O'Neill, he came, myself, and we went, he anointed the little boy, and then we all prayed. And because, he had a lot of things that need to be done, I said, why don't we go home now, touch base in the morning? Mm-hmm. And so in the morning we told the sisters what happened. Then the principal of the school, Sister Victoria, and Sister Luana, the teacher of the little boy, went to see Jack, and they took a holy card of Mother Teresa. When they reached there, they prayed, and then they left that little card by Jack's bed. Mm-hmm. Okay, and his mother, she was praying so hard. So she knelt there all night with this card, and prayed. And then she told about 4 or 5 parishes. And so we kept praying. Then was the Feast of the Sacred Heart on Friday. Then we were having the auxiliary with us, and then the phone rang during Mass. We do not answer during Mass, but after the Mass, I went to take care of the auxiliary. My assistant, who happened to be Sister Victoria at the time, she went to see what the message was. And when he heard that it was Mr. Sebest, he was kind of crying, so her heart began racing. She thought the worst of it. But when she found out that he said that Jack was beginning to respond in a positive way, then on Saturday, sisters were going to go there, and when they arrived there, everybody was saying they took everything off. The boy awoke like nothing ever happened.
Wow.
And she said, what are we doing here? I want to go home. I want to have some of the chocolate chips that the sisters made. I want the pasta that the sisters made. So, and everybody, nurses, everybody was just miracle. Mm-hmm. And then all it began, that we had to do what we needed to do in order to, to have the miracle approved. It took a long time. Mother did what she needed to do.
Absolutely. And were you involved in that process at all?
One of the promoter of that, helped by Msgr Cariglio, and then one of our bishop in Rome was one of our former students.
Okay.
And he was really pushing, but we had to do it in God's time. Yeah.
Well, that's an amazing story. It's really awesome that you were there for that.
I could go on and on talking about that because that was such a great experience, especially when we went to Rome for beatification.
Well, thank you so much, Sister. I've really enjoyed getting to speak with you. And if you would like to listen to this podcast online, it can be found at www.catholicecho.org.
The Catholic Echo podcast is a production of the Roman Catholic Diocese of Youngstown. Your host has been Dennis Biviano. Have a blessed day, and may God be with you.